You may have seen this video going viral on YouTube. It's currently sitting at almost 2.5 million views, with 95,000 likes and pages of comments calling it real, important journalism. That's because it offers an unfiltered, unsanitized look at something people are desperate to see more of, but rarely get to see: Shein's supply chains. The video, called "I Went Undercover at Shein's Factory Village" and made by Cinthia, is a 10-minute documentary showing the realities of a garment manufacturing area in China's Panyu district, called Nanshun, or colloquially Shein Village. After watching this, I reached out to Cinthia and basically begged her to talk to me about everything she learned in this video and everything she'd missed out, and her reaction to this video going viral. She said yes. And not only that, she showed me unseen footage that didn't make it into the original video, and also the videos that inspired her to go along to the Shein village in the first place, that exposed some of the deeper issues happening within Shein supply chains.
These workers, they don't know what Shein is showing us, like on their official website, how Shein is showing how nicely the factories are and how nicely these employees are being treated. I don't think the people who actually work in the supply chain know Shein is doing this.
I didn't think 10 minutes was enough time to listen to someone who's actually seen Shein's supply chain firsthand. Like I mentioned, the company is notoriously tight-lipped about its operations, and this video is one of our only unfiltered looks into the factories completing orders for one of the biggest fashion brands in the world. So I sat down with Cinthia and I asked her to tell me more. What was your kind of knowledge before you filmed the video about Shein supply chains, and what are your takeaways now?
I think when I first noted about Shein's supply chain is I saw a video on a Chinese social media called Red, and I saw like quite a lot of comments under that video saying that how Shein is like very bad to the suppliers and also to the people that work in the supply chain. So I think me going into the village is just to want to verify if these claims are true. Shein before, I think they actually took a group of influencers, they fly them from the US to Dongguan, China, which is also, I think, a hub for their supply chain that's in China. And I think they've been showing all these influencers, all these like very nice factory, all this like very nice facility that they are treating the employees. This type of factory, it only represents a very small fraction of garment manufacturing factory in China. The ones that I show in my videos, I think are actually pretty much an industry average that I would say. I actually expected to see that. And to be honest, I would actually expect to see worse, but they're actually not that bad.
But yeah, I want to come back to this because you mentioned that in the video, and I want to talk about like how you mentioned that it's not as bad as you were initially thinking. But you
Mm,
mentioned Red there, and that you saw another video on the
mm.
platform. And like in your video, I think you also referenced a couple of other videos of like Shein workers with like calluses.
Those videos are actually from TikTok, from the Chinese TikTok. Some of them are actually posted by official account of Shein for hiring purpose that you would be surprised that they were just like describing these are their working condition. If like you come, you can actually make a lot of money, but you will have to bear these working conditions. I think a lot more exploitation actually happen in logistics and not in manufacturing. And I think those issues has always been underreported and overlooked.
Is this kind of content quite prevalent on Chinese TikTok? Because it's not really on the
Yes.
TikTok that we have here.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised. So there are actually quite a lot this type of content that's on the Chinese TikTok that posted just by their employees or ex-employees, and also sometimes by their hiring manager that they want to just hire people to work for their logistic hub, because I think turnover inside the logistic hub is very high. Not that many people can bear that type of working condition. That's why a lot of people like quit like even within a month.
What are the comments like on these videos?
Usually are the people who actually work, also who has experience working in Shein. They would just verify if this is like what they also experience. They also comment on how much they make, also comment on how many hours they work.
I haven't really seen any of those kinds of videos on our TikTok. Really kind of interesting that you're getting all of these. I also wanted to go into the influencer trip and these like really sanitized press releases that Shein put out about their supply hubs and manufacturing hubs, and like your reaction to that compared to what you saw. Like maybe
Mhm.
you could dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, I grew up in China, so I grew up seeing my parents and their co-worker working in this environment. So to me, I get used to it, so I'm not surprised. The first thing that came in mind, it would not be exploitation because it's just like so normal to us. Because I also saw a video before going in the Shein village about these environment in Bangladesh. They're a lot worse than the ones in China. So that's why that might be like the comparison that I try to make. So that's why I don't find it very surprised.
What were the conditions you read about in Bangladesh? How did they compare? What was it that's happening in Bangladesh that's that's not happening in China?
I think one big thing is pollution. I think the Chinese government now put a lot of emphasis on regulating pollution, especially in the manufacturing side. I think garment factory being one of the biggest polluters in the manufacturing sector. I do actually film quite a few footage that I didn't show in the video about how they deal with some of, how do you say that, those like processed water after the production.
Like
So
water filtration or like
yeah, I
treatment?
think so. I think that has actually been done okay.
I guess what stood out to me, I think it's interesting you say that you weren't that shocked about the working conditions. And I mean, I think what really struck me was the working hours you said people went through. You said they were working, I
Mhm.
think, from like 8 o'clock to 10
Mhm.
p.m. with only a
Mhm.
couple of breaks and, you know, like also having to do mandatory overtime at times. Is that working culture quite normalized there? Because it's quite shocking here, I suppose.
In China, I would say yes. China has this like very famous hustling culture called 996, and I think that usually only refer to people who work in the corporate culture and in the private sector. I think for the workers that we see in the video, I think they are better in the sense that the longer they work, the more they get paid because they're paid by piece. So some of them, they don't mind working longer because they can just make more to support their family, especially the city that I film. It's one of the top cities that in China. So living expense could be higher than a lot of other cities in China. So if they can make more, I don't think they would mind.
I mean, even when you were talking to people and you were saying, is that with overtime? And they were just like, yes. Wasn't even
Mhm.
almost a question for some of them. Kind of brings me on to you doing interviews with people there, and going into the factories and stuff like. I mean, what is the local opinion towards Shein and I suppose the amount of factories they have in just one area?
On the consumer side, not many Chinese know about the company Shein because Shein does not do business in China. I think the only people that knows about Shein are the ones that who work with or work for Shein. So when these issues are being discussed in Chinese platform, not many people know about this, but I think only the people who have worked in Shein that they know how might not be a very pleasant experience working with them.
And
Yeah.
even the people working in the village, obviously they know who they're working for. What was their kind of opinion about such a big company? I mean, taking over a village almost.
Yeah, for that village, I think Shein accounts for 80% of their business in that business. From factory owners' perspective, I think they are actually happy that they have this business, even though that this business doesn't pay that well, and sometimes they have to like work very long just to fulfill that request. But because I think for the garment factory in China, because it's so competitive, I think they are just happy that they have the business. It's not a very good business.
So there's none of that public outrage that sustainability advocates like me, we condemn it so much, but there's none of that, or just for the people in the know.
I don't think they care that much at this point. I think younger generation definitely being educated in China, and I think a lot for my parents' generation, and even like for the people that who work in the factory, and they actually don't pay much attention to that.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because they're the ones that are sitting there with their hands on the garments and seeing the
Mhm.
amount of items that they're putting through and how long it takes. That's quite interesting that you think
Mhm.
they're not
Yeah.
even seeing that side
Mm.
of it.
Yeah, I mentioned to you one in my research how these suppliers will deal with this like inventory. I'm not sure how it is done in Europe, but in China, it's actually a business. So for factories who have this like unsold inventory, some of them will also try to sell these products on like on other platforms, on like e-commerce platform, just to like get some cash flow back. And that's one way to deal with that. And sometimes there will be people in this business that will just like come buy these inventory in bulk, usually by weight. Let's say if it's like $10 per like 10 for 10 pounds, they would just like buy these in bulk and then sometimes clean it and then resell it to like Africa or some other less developed country.
And that's happening right at the supplier that you're
Yes.
walking through.
That's actually the common practice in China.
But the responsibility is on the suppliers to get rid of any inventory that's gone wrong or that
Yeah.
Shein no longer wants. It's then on the
hmm
supplier to manage that
Yes.
cost.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I suppose that can be quite crippling when their margins are so low when you're working with Shein.
Definitely. So for Shein's case, I think in some scenarios, the suppliers are responsible in coming up with like design for Shein to choose to like push to their clients. And Shein would sometimes just like try out a few items and only order a very little quantity, let's say a couple hundred. If these don't go well, like on the platform, the supplier have like all the risks of like just like inventory, and Shein does not allow them to sell on any platform. So that's why a lot of supplier quit because it's so high.
It sort of seems like an ingrained culture that you keep bringing up, and like Shein is just part of the ingrained culture of the garment industry in China,
Mhm,
and all of these things are quite common practice. Is there
mhm.
like a general upset in the state of the industry, or is it just accepted? Like, are people complaining? Are they trying to change it?
I think there are like definitely players in the industry that who want to change this. But there are also players, they are just like willing to do anything just for business, not just on like the employee level, but also on the factory level. They also work so hard just to like cut their price and like give like very good like policy to Shein just to get their business. I think it might be the entire industry. It's like that. I think one of the biggest risks that Shein now face definitely is political risk, and especially with US being one of the biggest consumers
Mhm.
of Shein, and especially the things going on between China and US. I think Shein definitely thought of moving, I think, most of their supply chain to like Vietnam, to Bangladesh.
Yeah.
But I think they are like resistant that Chinese government does not like allow Shein to do that, because also the government want to protect the domestic workers.
What is the public opinion about Shein potentially pulling out the country?
We don't see much news about that, to be honest. I would say it's more like rumors that we see on social media. For most of the consumer, we don't know about this brand. They don't do business in China, so it doesn't hurt that much. I think only for the supplier, they could feel, wow, Shein does account for a large amount of their business. So that's why it does mean a lot to them. And because in China, there's no union there, it's no this like collective authority that would help these factories to like get better conditions or like get a policy from big players like Shein.
Going back to the video, what was the most surprising part of it? Because I suppose you said that you weren't too surprised about the working conditions. So did you have something that did surprise you?
Yes, I think it's the exploitation that's in logistics that no one talks about. I could actually show you some of the working condition that employee posts on Chinese TikTok, and you know how fast-paced those they work. You'll see that how stressful that is. So this is like inside the logistic hub. So
Hmm.
I wasn't able to film it because only people who work in there are able to get inside. And this is like what's happening in logistic hub. So this is where they work.
So fast.
I know. For them, I heard they are not paid by piece, they are paid hourly. I think their rate is around 25 Chinese yuan. That's about 750 per hour US dollar.
Okay.
But they are requested by their manager. They have to like process hundreds of like pieces per hour. So for this worker, he said he gets off at 12 a.m.
Fully dark outside, pitch black.
So that's their dormitory. To be honest, these dormitories condition are actually very poor, and it's actually some common practice that's in China.
I went through all the comments on your video. So many people were saying this is great journalism and that you need to be doing this more. But also, some people were a bit concerned for your safety. And
Yeah,
what
I
was
think
that
that's like the
like?
most comments that I got. I really thank everyone like who is like concerning my safety, but people even discuss publicly in Chinese platforms. So this is actually something people like talk about in China as well. It is not something that is not allowed to talk about in China. So I think that's like one of the
Interesting.
misconceptions that people get.
All of the comments were like, be careful, censor people
Yeah.
more. Do you think it's something you want to keep doing, keep looking into?
Probably not at this point, because I kind of feel that this video caused so much conflict. And because I know that you also see a lot of comments that people say, oh, they will stop buying from Shein. But I also know that that only represent a very small fraction of Shein's consumers. So
Mm.
I don't know, is it going to change anything? I don't know. And this situation that's happening in fast fashion supply chain, it's not going to change in the short run because of like the demand and supply of labor that's in China and also in Southeast Asia. And if China raised the bar for garment factory production, I think a lot of fashion brand they would just like move their supply chain to somewhere else.
Yeah, that's always the threat, isn't it? You push
Yeah.
back and they just go. And you mentioned a lot of conflict from the video. What do you mean? What was it in the comments of the video? You got some bad
Uh,
comments or?
no, I think the conflict it's more like about do I think this is exploitation? So first, even though they pay by piece, but they are actually pay for market rate. It's like the industry average in China. So they are not forced to work there. So there's like no involuntary labor. And so for people that who work in their logistic hub, even though the environment is so bad and the hours so long, but they're actually compensated for the work that they've done. So if you can bear those conditions, you can actually make more than the average income that's in China. So I would question, does this count as exploitation? A friend that I spoke with, they would say that it is not exploitation because no one forced them to work. They get paid and they get paid to raise their family. And these are some of the comments that I see under the video as well. But very interestingly, if that's your parent who work in these like jobs, are you okay with that? The answer is always no. Then they think, I think there is exploitation, but it's more like exploiting the system of like low cost labor.
Yeah.
That's China.
That was going to be my question. It's like you're walking into this situation with open eyes. So maybe you're choosing to do it, but the system is built off unfair practices that benefit off exploitation.
That's why I feel conflicted. So do I think this is exploitation? I sure I do. Because if my parent work in this job, I for sure do not want them to do this. But it does seem that this kind of job that exists for a reason. So people are willing to do it for this price. So I think often it's the demand and supply of labor that set the price for the labor that the cost that they're getting. Yeah, so I don't know. So that's why I feel conflicted. So it's like really hard to find, is this exploitation? It is a practice that's in China or like even in the garment factory that just exists.
It's a very hard one if people know what they're getting into. And I didn't even know that Shein was kind of promoting these videos, showing these conditions as a way to get people in. Like that's completely new to me. I've never seen that before.
I know, right? People that who actually apply for jobs that's inside the logistic hub, they will say that if you have like no obligation, it's hard for you to stay because it is tough. But if you have obligation to fulfill, like you have debts to pay, you have like family to raise, then okay, you can push it through.
People will put up with what they have to in a hard situation. I wanted to ask if you had any trouble filming or if you had any hostility when you were filming and you were going into these places.
Much, to be honest. So in the villages, in particular, a lot of factory have their doors open. So I wasn't interrupting anyone so that's doing their job. And I was just like filming outside of the factories. A lot of like workers saw me though, film the video. If they don't want to be filmed, they would just like nicely tell me that they don't want to be in the camera. But anything other than that, I think no, not much of that.
Given that Shein's like track record is very secret supply chain, I'm interested that it doesn't trace back down to their workers and their suppliers.
I think main reason is these workers, they don't know what Shein is showing us, like on their official website, how Shein is showing how nicely the factories are and how nicely these employees are being treated. I don't think the people that who actually work in the supply chain know Shein is doing this, and to them it is a common practice in the industry. So if they take the business, they would like bear the condition.
That's really interesting, actually, that you don't think people know what Shein's telling the rest of the world. Cinthia and I were actually speaking for so long that Zoom cut off the end of the video just as we were wrapping up. But I wanted to say thank you so much to her for sitting down with me and explaining not only her thoughts and takeaways from that viral video, but her perspective of Shein's business model and practices as someone who's very aware of China's manufacturing industry and has first-hand experience growing up there. If you like this video and you want to see more, then make sure to subscribe to Cynthia's channel and my channel. And if you want to see the video that sparked this entire discussion, then I'm going to be linking it in the description below, and I highly recommend you go watch it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll speak to you soon and have a nice day. Bye.